Hey, what's going on?
How you doing?
Get in here. It's like 110 in the shade out there.
It's beautiful Phoenix weather, man.
I gotta ask you, because you're working full time. You're running a business. You have a young family. You're running for office, and you're the chairman of the Libertarian Party. Are your priorities a little screwed up? Why do you spend so much time on this libertarian thing? Because normal people don't do this. You know that, right?
I've heard about these normal people. I'd like to meet some sometime. No, I would love to just sit at home with my kids and work on the garden out back and get into permaculture and all that stuff. You know, go back to brewing beer. But having children really changed my priorities. When you realize that your kids are going to grow up in a world that's going to be whatever it's going to be, you get really amped about the idea that you want them to grow up in a world that's more free than you grew up in. It's like one of the founders said, you know, I study war so that my children can study art. You know, they can study literature.
Yeah.
You do the things you do to put your children in a better place. It's just like, you know, normal people, they work real hard so their kids can go to college or have better opportunities. I feel that the best thing that I can do as a legacy for my children is work to make this country the best country in the world and the freest country in the world, so that we are once again a shining city on a hill. And I think the Libertarian Party is the best vehicle for that. And until someone else steps up who's able to do that better than me, I feel like there's, you know, when you have an ability or a talent for something, ethically, I think that you're obligated to take that opportunity and make the most out of it.
You know, I've watched, as I get older, I started off being an Austrian economist, and I read Ayn Rand when I was 13. And when you're young, you assume everybody else processes information and the way that you do.
Right.
And it turned out that I was the weirdo, and normal people don't think about things like economics, and they don't necessarily use economic logic to process arguments about policy and right and wrong and all that stuff. And I upset some of my Ron Paul friends, because I think at a very important, emotional, and maybe just an inch deep level, Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul are kind of the same guy. They're both raging against permanent war. They're both raging against crony capitalism, and the list goes on. And people forget that they actually work together on auditing the Federal Reserve. But for most people, it's that emotional argument that attracts people. So I wouldn't write off democratic socialists. I would very much go to them and say, if you're upset about bailing out Wall Street and the collusion between big business and big government, the last thing you want to do is give government more power, because that's what they do.
Yeah, I got some very angry comments when I said the same thing on a stage at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas. I said Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul are the same guy, and people booed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what they have is an authenticity about what they believe that inspires people, because for so long the politicians have been liars and still are. And so when you see a guy who actually means what he says, who follows his principles, that's inspirational to young people, because they still think in that idealistic mold. They're not old and they're not cynical.
Yeah. And
tapping into that and not getting into this mentality of tribalism, where, you know, that's the guy from the other tribe, we have to hate that guy. That professional sports mentality of, you know, guys that like the other team are bad guys. We all want to drink beer and watch football. You know, we may like different teams, but that doesn't mean we have to be acrimonious about it. And I think with socialists, you just have to show them what works and what doesn't work, right? You know, you agree on what the goal is. We want people to be able to have opportunity without being saddled with, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. How do we get there? And is subsidizing college the right way to do it? Or is that going to create some of these same perverse incentives that we had from subsidizing the loans for college?
That's a perfect segue because this is my show, so we get to do what I want to do, and I like to drink beer. So come on in, we're gonna have a beer.
Awesome, thanks.
So when I was 13, I was reading the liner notes on a Rush album that were dedicated to the genius of Ayn Rand, and I sort of accidentally discovered libertarian ideas, by the way, through a rock band and then through a novel. How did you discover libertarianism?
So I was a kid in Phoenix. My dad was active in the Maricopa County Libertarian Party, going to meetings with people like Ernie Hancock, and he brought me to a county meeting. And I got to meet these people, and they were fun people, and he was working on campaigns and stuff. And he had on his bookshelf a copy of David Bergland's Libertarianism in One Lesson. It's a tiny book. And I was a voracious reader as a kid. I was kind of a nerd. I read it. Everything made sense to me. And I was like, this is me. I am also a libertarian like my father. I'm not going to rebel. I think this is the right thing to be. And so I've never been anything else other than a libertarian, and a second generation one at that. And I think that that gives me like a different perspective than a lot of people who come to the party from some other political home. It's like a lapsed Catholic. You may have left the church, but you've always got a little chip on your shoulder where you want the respect from the people you left behind. I don't have any of that. I don't need any respect from either of the two old teams.
So as soon as you recruit your kids to the philosophy of liberty, and maybe you put books in their crib just to make sure it hits early, that's going to be a claim to fame that I've never heard before. 3 generations libertarian, because my dad was a Reagan conservative, and I sort of rebelled against that when I was a kid. And it's funny, my first vote was against Ronald Reagan and for the Libertarian. I don't remember who it was in 1984.
See, this is gonna look bad if I don't know. It was Bergland. It was David Bergland.
There you go.
Wow, it's all funny. Spooky. No, they're already reading Tuttle Twins stuff, and when we talk about stuff that happens in the world, in the city, in politics, we grapple with those issues, and we talk about things. If you ever talk to Lee Schoolin, she has a really good presentation on raising libertarian kids. We talk about things that we do because they're right and things that we do because the government has rules. And there's a difference. You know, there's stuff we do to stay out of jail because there are people with guns who would put us in jail if we don't do it. But then there are values that we have and ethics we have in the home that are what is really important.
Speaking of kids and libertarianism, one of my obsessions is craft beer. And oh look, we happen to have some craft beers. And
Belching Beaver Deftones.
I don't know a lot about this brewery, but Belching Beaver is
I know a lot about the Deftones.
Part of this new generation of craft brewers that pursue this very important project of seeing just how much hops you can get into a beer before it doesn't work anymore. So let's have a beer.
Before I got so busy, I've homebrewed for probably over 2 decades now, and it's just hard to do here in Phoenix because it's hard to get cold water in the summertime to do a cold break.
What's your favorite style of beer?
I like IPAs, although, you know, I have an affinity for Berliner Weiss. Just there's something about a light style like that. There's a lot more that you can do with the yeast. There's a lot more interesting flavors, and then, you know, dressing them up with syrups in the traditional way.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's probably the counter-revolution. Because we've over the last 10 years, and certainly with the New England IPAs, we've been going in this direction of quadruple barrel-aged stouts, and I've actually had a quadruple IPA, which I thought was fantastic, but maybe not a session beer. And the counter-revolution is a 3.5% Berliner Weiss that is actually something you can drink.
Right.
And I love this, and the reason we do so much with beer is that, you know, most young people are not dorks like us. We're not reading Human Action and Atlas Shrugged. We're drinking beer. And beer to me is a metaphor for everything we believe in. I half jokingly came up with this beer freedom index. And I think it's actually true that when you go to your local grocery store, if there is a wall of local beers, hundreds of different styles, dozens and dozens and maybe hundreds of different producers, that's some proxy for how free you are as a country. And it all started because I read an article about 2 years ago about Venezuela running out of the ingredients to make beer. You can't get a beer in socialist hellhole Venezuela. And I was just sort of joking about it, but as you started to think about it, there's some economic lessons to be learned about why it is that Venezuela can no longer import the ingredients, very simple ingredients, to make their lousy government-controlled corporate lager. And so this is a metaphor for all sorts of economic lessons.
And it goes back to some stuff that Orwell explored in 1984, which is the concept of even a badly run socialist country has to deal with what people actually need. Humans are humans and they need things. And one of the things they need is beer. And if they can't have the beer, then they get upset. Yeah. You can keep people going for a long time in a really bad system as long as basic needs are met. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of, socialist petrostates keep gas prices low. Because one of the things they can do is make sure you can fill up your car. You may not be able to get any parts when it breaks, but you can at least keep it running.
So, we're talking about this project of reaching a broader audience. A lot of conservatives will be watching this. What's the elevator pitch to someone that's frustrated? Say, for instance, the fact that the Republican Party, which now controls all of Washington, D.C., is spending like drunken sailors. So what is the libertarian elevator pitch for why they should think about a new party?
So one of the pitches is that the values that conservatives hold dear, fiscal conservatism, the idea that government should stay out of your personal life or your family life, are being upheld by the Libertarian Party. It's something that we've upheld for 47 years that the Republican Party has gotten away from. One of the things that holds people back, and I talked to Glenn Beck about this, there's a different kind of conservative that's right for the Libertarian Party and there's a kind that's wrong. If you're conservative in your own values and how you live your life, and that's good enough for you, then the Libertarian Party is the right place for you. If you need me to be conservative in my life, and you need the government to pass a law to make me be conservative, the Libertarian Party is never going to fit exactly for you. Still, there's a good reason for you to get involved, and that is that you don't change a bad behavior by enabling it. So as long as you keep giving your votes to Republicans when they do things like increase spending and the national debt and all the things that you don't like, they'll keep doing it. They only change when you take your vote away. As long as you're, on that team and they know they can count on you, they don't care about your vote. They care about the vote of the people who are, the Obama-Trump voter. They care about those people because that's the margin. You need to become marginal to them and say, I'm going to take my money away. I'm going to give my money to Gary Johnson for Senate or Nicholas Sarwark for mayor so that they get a clear signal that if you're bad enough as a party, if you leave my values, I leave you. That's a message that can only be sent by taking away the sanction.
And doesn't libertarianism basically say, I'm not here to tell you whether or not to be conservative or liberal in your personal life, because I don't think that that's a political decision. I don't think that's a government decision. I think that's for you and your community. That's for you and your church. That's for you and your family to figure out on your own. So we get to be Switzerland in the culture war, I think.
Basically, we're Switzerland. We get to say, and the tribalism is terrible, and you see it where if someone from the other team does the thing, they're bad, but then your guy does the thing and you're like, oh, well, it's not so bad, and vice versa. What we get to say is, look, I have opinions, and this is a very important spot for libertarians to remember. Libertarianism doesn't have any sort of role for government to get involved to say that you can't think that a person of another race is inferior to you, right? We're not going to pass a law that says you can't believe that, or you can't write that, or you can't talk about that on the internet. We're very pro open expression and free communication. That doesn't mean that libertarians can't say, look, racism is stupid and dumb, and people who do it are stupid and dumb, and we reject it. And our party platform very clearly rejects it. Bigotry and racism are not a way to build a society. We have to make sure that we express our values, who we are as people, and there are very different opinions within the party, but we do it in a way that's peaceful. That's the biggest thing about libertarianism that's different from the old parties, is we're peaceful about it. And I was explaining this to somebody who was very conservative, that the reason the culture wars got so mean was people knew whoever won was going to go pass a law and send cops to enforce their vision of society. When we all agree to disarmament, where we're not going to use the government to enforce our values on other people, then we can have good, productive conversations. We can talk about how I think you should recycle and you think I shouldn't, because none of us are going to pass a law that's going to make it mandatory or prohibited.
Yeah. I'm fascinated about the just rabid emergence of identity politics on both sides now, and I sort of naively perhaps always thought that Martin Luther King got it right. Like, I want to judge people based on the content of their character, and you say that today, particularly on the left, and they jump down your throat. They're like, that's outrageous. Apparently that's a form of racism in the twisted Orwellian way that people think about things. But I still embrace what Ayn Rand said. Like, racism is the most primitive form of collectivism. Right. Judging people based on the color of their skin is repugnant and stupid, and yet I feel like the left doesn't believe that anymore.
They don't, and this is a long-standing debate. If you go back and you look at Frederick Douglass versus Marcus Garvey, they've had this debate. This debate has been going for as long as there have been the concept of races, which, you know, as a scientific matter, you kind of reject a little bit. There's genetic differences, but the concept of race as being inherent traits is just weird. But, you know, Garvey was very much kind of almost a black supremacist. Let's go start our own institutions and be proud of blackness, whereas Douglass was more of a, we need to all be integrated into the same society and work on an equal footing and work to get to an equal footing, which required work because we definitely weren't on an equal footing in Reconstruction or Jim Crow or even probably now. But the target was to get to a place where we moved past that. My personal belief, and this is just me, is you shouldn't be proud of anything that you didn't earn. I get that I'm privileged by being born white and being born in the United States, because I could have been born all around the world in a lot worse places. I'm not proud of it. I'm not ashamed of it. It's a thing that I know that I got as kind of winning a lottery, right? Whereas my law degree, you know, being able to say that I have gotten a man acquitted on a first-degree murder charge where they could have died in prison and instead have a chance to restart their life, my children, how they're raised, these are things I'm proud of because these are things I did. And yeah, I couldn't have got there without some things that I got lucky on. And I think there's a way to recognize that we get lucky on some stuff and be proud of the stuff we do, but we need to be aware of it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And my progressive friends would talk about white privilege and where we end up. I'd love to.
I have a great white privilege story for you if you want to hear it. Hit me with it. All right. So I was living in Colorado, right, south of Denver, and I played in a lawyer football league, which wasn't very good. It was two-hand touch or two-hand shove, depending on how much you didn't like the other guy. And I was late on a Sunday morning. So I'm pulling out of my suburb, driving. I was speeding. Lone Tree police officer pulls me over. Little lights, I pull over. Comes up to the car, says license and registration. I'm like, I'm gonna give you my license and registration. I want you to know I've got a gun in the glove box. He said, okay. So I pull out, it's a Ruger LC9. take the gun out of the glove box, set it on the seat next to me. It's racked because really why carry a gun that's not? He takes my license and registration, walks back to his car, runs my thing, whatever. There is a loaded, racked handgun on my seat. Comes back to the car, says, you know, I see you live in the neighborhood, you need to slow down, here's my business card if you have any questions about the stop, don't drive so fast. And I go about my way. I was a public defender at the time. I know that if I was an African American man in Aurora, that's not how that goes down. I'm splayed out on the ground or I'm shot. That doesn't happen the same because of the color of my skin, because of the suburb I lived in. That's a real thing. And when people on the right or in the conservative movement say white privilege is just all BS, they're not grappling with reality. The reality is there's stuff that's structurally just different depending on the color of your skin in our society as it exists. And saying it's not real blinds you from the truth. It doesn't let you get to the next step, which is what should we do about it?
Yeah. So I've buttered you up into this point where I'm going to hit you with my gotcha question.
That's why he plied me with beer.
Yeah, get you a little liquored up.
It's like Vegas.
People are watching this and they're like, yeah, Nick, this actually all sounds good, but libertarians don't win anything. Why the hell would you be part of something if we're not going to win?
So usually I ask the question, do you have a bookie? Do you have a bookie, Matt?
No.
I should definitely get a bookie. Everybody needs a bookie. When people say, I don't want to vote for the Libertarian, I want to vote for somebody that's winning, I always ask, do you have a ticket that says, if this guy wins the election, you get paid? Or do you have a job lined up where he promised you something if he wins, and if he doesn't win, you don't get the job? If either of those things are true, you should totally vote for the winner, right? Make some money, get a job, get yourself ahead. But that's not true for the vast majority of Americans. Your vote is not a lottery ticket. It's not a horse race ticket. It's not a football card. What it is a statement about what it is you want. And as long as you tell politicians that I want something crappy because there's something crappier out there, they're going to hear you loud and clear and know that all they got to do is like point to the other moldy sandwich and be like, come on, take a bite of that ham and cheese. It's not as bad as that roast beef. That one's gross. We're basically rolling up with a taco truck with tasty Korean tacos with like a little sriracha sauce on them and saying, why are you eating sandwiches anymore? This is not a bet ticket. This is not a win if they win. And the truth is that, we've got almost 200 people serving elected office. We're winning all the time. We have a good shot at winning a U.S. Senate seat in New Mexico. I've got a good shot at winning a mayor's seat here in Phoenix. We're getting there because we keep doing the work and we keep trying for what we want instead of settling for what we don't.
Cheers to that.
Find a bookie.